share, recipe share. Share a little recipe with Recipe Share. Recipe Share, Recipe Share. Share a little recipe with Recipe Share.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Recipe Share, a program on AADL TV where we take a few minutes to talk about recipes in a featured category. Today's category is Nuts for Nuts. I'm Beth, and as usual, I'm joined today by Elizabeth and Katie. So, Elizabeth, tell us what you are nuts for nuts about.
All right, I will. So the first recipe I made was for a peanut carrot soup that was very good, but I cannot recommend making it. I just want to talk about it very briefly though, because it was good. And I don't understand how people do this. Basically, I'm not going to talk about the whole thing, but you ended up roasting carrots, apples, and some onion in the oven. And then in the meantime, you were soaking some peanuts in chicken broth in a blender. And then you added everything as it came out of the oven and blended it. I don't know what size blenders people have. I'm looking at my blender right now and it seems normal, but like it did not fit at all. I didn't feel like I could do it in batches. I think blending hot things is just always stressful. So I wish I could recommend the recipe because it was good, but it was such a pain and so messy. And so I was like trying to take stuff out and put it back in. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about that, but that was my first
Forget
idea.
about it. Hey, I
So
want to ask you though, were they
Yeah.
roasted peanuts or raw? How?
They were just fresh, and then you soaked them in chicken broth, and then also there was some peanut butter in it, and then carrot, apple, onion. It was good. I don't know. I don't know what I do. I didn't anyway.
Okay, we'll forget about it.
But I have a backup that I kind of made last minute is my point in telling you all that, because I thought that was going to be my thing, but it's not. And it involves pine nuts, which are technically seeds, but sometimes you just got to roll with it. So I was thinking about my pesto. I love my pesto. I don't always use pine nuts because they are expensive, but that's how I grew up. My mom always used pine nuts, basil, Parmesan, fresh lemon juice, olive oil. And I was like, I think we've already talked about pesto quite a bit here. So I found a recipe for deconstructed pesto beans. Okay. So this starts out by you heat 6 tablespoons of olive oil in a skillet, and then you add a 1/4 cup of pine nuts, and then you let them kind of start to sizzle and brown. And right when they start to change color, you throw in some turmeric. So it makes them this like bright yellow color. Okay. And then you set those aside. And then in the same skillet, you are going to have 3 large shallots that are sliced thinly, 5 garlic cloves sliced thinly, and then you stir in 2 cans of cannellini beans and a cup of vegetable or chicken stock. And you kind of bring it to a simmer and then turn the heat down to low. And basically you just kind of let that be I didn't really say how long, so I just let it go for a few minutes, and then you stir in a cup of finely grated Parmesan, and you kind of let it melt into the broth. And basically you just when the mixture looks creamy, season to taste with salt and pepper and turn off the heat. Then you're going to throw in a 1.5 cups of tightly packed basil leaves, and then you're going to drizzle with lemon and top with the pine nuts and more Parmesan. So you have all the kind of components of pesto: the basil, the Parmesan, the lemon, the pine nuts, the olive oil, but not all together. And it ends up making this kind of brothy, beany soup type thing that obviously was very delicious. The toasted pine nuts are just fabulous in my opinion. And I don't think I'm going to make it all the time because the pine nuts are so expensive, and the amount that it called for this recipe ended up being like close to $10 for me. but it was really good and it was super easy and a really nice winter kind of stovetop thing that just got all those flavors in without having to get out your uh, blender or food processor, which after my soup experience, I was not doing again. So anyway, I ended up making the deconstructed pesto bean kind of brothy situation and featuring lots of pine nuts, and it was good.
That sounds good. It sounds like a pesto-y chili sort of, and that just sounds delicious and definitely not like something that I've had before. So I would be excited to try that. And I really like the addition of the turmeric with the pine nuts. That sounds really, really tasty.
Yeah, where did you find the recipe?
I found it's kind of funny. I found it on a website, but then as I was reading more, I believe that they took it from New York Times Cooking.
Okay.
So, then I realized that it was originally from, that. So it's by, Christian Reynoso is the chef who came up with it. So it did have 5 out of 5 stars with 2,281 ratings. So I'm like, that's, people like it. So.
That's awesome.
Um, okay, anyway, so Katie, what nuts did you use or did you cheat and also use seeds?
Well, it's funny that you had a little misstep before you landed on your recipe because I did too. I ended up making like this nut stuffed mushroom caps and it was just not good. I will never do that again. So, pivoted to a different direction and found this recipe for thick and chewy breakfast cookies. And this is from a website called scientificallysweet.com. And when I first stumbled across this recipe, I definitely thought it was going to be more of like a sort of healthy granola bar type recipe, probably because it's got the word breakfast in the title. But it definitely ended up being totally cookie. So these are really good cookies. It says to use a large bowl with an electric hand mixer, but I used my stand mixer for this and it worked great. I just loved like how low effort it was with just being able to throw everything in there. So you start with some softened butter, beat that together with brown sugar and some honey. And then once that's all fluffy, you beat in an egg and then some peanut butter and vanilla extract. Then you add in some oats and mix those around until they're coated nicely. And then in a separate bowl, you whisk together flour, baking soda, salt, add that all in, mix it up. And then you add chopped walnuts, pumpkin seeds, and sunflower seeds. So I use nuts and seeds in my recipe. And you mix that until it's just combined. And then you add in some dried cranberries and chocolate chips as well. So there's a lot of mix-ins in here. You refrigerate that dough for about 30 minutes. And then you just roll them into balls and flatten them down a little bit. And you add some extra walnuts on top, which I thought was a really nice addition to like bring out those nuts a little bit. You just bake them like you do cookies, let them cool, eat them. They're delicious. This recipe is super versatile too. Like with all the different mix-ins, you could really play with that a ton. And I think it would be good with other kinds of nuts. Particularly, I think macadamia nuts would be really good in here. Also pine nuts would be delicious too. Now that you brought that up, Elizabeth, I was like, oh yeah, that would be tasty in my recipe too. So, there you have it. Thick and chewy breakfast cookies.
It
Well,
reminds
that's
me a little bit of like almost like kitchen sink cookies, where you're
Oh,
just throwing
sure.
in like everything and yeah, sounds good.
yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds like not just for breakfast either, right?
Yeah, I don't think I ever ate these for breakfast. We were
But
definitely
but
treating
with
it like
the
dessert, but
yeah,
a
cranberries and
nice,
stuff.
like, filling snack though,
I
too,
was gonna
Yeah,
say
you
a
know?
snack, like an
Mhm.
afternoon
right.
snack seems like it'd be perfect. These would be good
Yes.
for.
They were very, very good.
Good.
Okay, Beth, tell us why you're nuts for nuts.
I am nuts for nuts, and I went with straight up nuts, and I got a recipe from Art of the Board, which I'm pretty sure I've gotten before, and I've made some candied nuts. I know I'm typically a savory snacker, but I did make some sweet ones. And these called for 2 egg whites, a stick of salted butter, 1.5 cups of granulated sugar, and a pound of nuts of choice, which they said pecans, almonds, or cashews. I used a bunch, like a package of mixed nuts that were kind of not your typical candied nuts. They did have you just said what they were, the macadamia nuts. They had pistachios, peanuts, almonds, and then I also added, so rather than do all of that, I also added a bunch of pecans. So it was a little mix of both of that. So you beat the egg whites till they're frothy, or foamy, whatever, peaks. They have peaks on them. And in the meantime, you place your stick of butter in a baking pan, like a cookie sheet. Melt the butter, takes about 4 minutes, put it in a 350 oven. And then you fold in your sugar with the egg whites, then pour the nuts in it, and then you put it on your pan, spread it evenly, mix that butter around, and then you bake it for 30 minutes. You mix it up every 10. So it's, you got to keep an eye on it, but it was really, really good. Lovely snack, very addicting. I just made them last night. And yeah, I grabbed a bunch, and it wasn't enough for me. So yeah, I would recommend this, and perhaps sometime I will include it on a board. But for now, they're just in a little baggie.
I was tempted to make candied nuts, Beth. I found a few recipes for them that looked really good. But now I'm glad I didn't, because you did. But now I do actually want to make them to
Yeah.
enjoy. So
I liked using the different, not your typical nuts too. It's just
Yeah.
made it different. It was, very good. Can't
Yeah,
complain.
that's what I was gonna comment on, is I've made candied nuts before, and I love making them around the holidays. It's great little side to have. But I've never used a mixture with pistachios or macadamia nuts in it, and that
Yeah.
sounds really good.
Yeah. Now the pistachios, some got, maybe just because they're so small, they might have gotten a little overdone, but
Okay.
with all the other sugar and stuff, you couldn't really tell. So yeah, it was good. I recommend it. And actually the nuts that we did have, I didn't care for because they weren't salted. So I'm like, I'm not eating these, but now I am, because they're
Yeah.
sugar.
Yeah.
So let me get to, well, if we don't have anything else to talk about with our nut recipes, I'll say thank you for watching Recipe Share, and be sure to click the link below to look at the event page on aadl.org to find the recipes we talked about, and share your own in the comments. Join us next time when we will be sharing recipes with rice. Rice is nice, and it is. And so thank you again for watching.
Recipe share, recipe share, share a little recipe with Recipe Share.